there's this other series that we've launched late last year called Notable Age Statements. And this is really something I wanted to do for a long time, was create a home for multiple types of spirits. I think it's always been important ever since we started Decadent Drinks to be diverse and to do and embrace multiple spirits. So obviously the four main ones we do being whiskey, rum, Armagnac and cognac. And I thought, well, what unifies all those spirits? And to me, the answer was time. Time taken to mature them, time taken to make them. And whether they're young or old, I think the age, the number, the time that they've taken to reach that profile is really interesting and meaningful. So really I thought NAS, non-age statement, notable age statement, let's just turn that on its head and reclaim that little set of letters. So we did NAS as a kind of home for multiple spirits, all focusing on the age. And we've had some really beautiful bottlings under that series so far. Like there's a stunning 58-year-old Armagnac. The first bottling we did, a really gorgeous 30-year-old blended malt. And it's a nice little series for me to put blended malts into. It works well as a home for that sort of product. And I wish I could do more blended malts. Essentially what I like doing is just making potions and creating like mad cocktails. But unfortunately, it's quite difficult to do in terms of like getting the balance right, getting the volume right. It takes longer to sell these sorts of products. So you have to be quite careful doing it. But with this one, I think we got a really good recipe, and I'm really happy with the result. So it's a 17-year-old blended malt made from 2 sherry butts. What I wanted to do was create a profile which embraced more of a kind of old style sherry flavor, like clean, fruity, very, very accessible, quite sweet sherry that wasn't particularly meaty. It wasn't particularly gamey or leathery or heavy. Like a lot of, some sherry casks can be extraordinarily like heavy, chewy, tough, beautiful, but sometimes a bit tough. And this was something what I wanted to try and achieve, was easy sherry, easy, fruity, gorgeous sherry. So I really feel like we've achieved that with this bottling. Like the 2001 blended malt butt was one half of it, and then the other half was a 2006 first fill sherry butt of Aultmore. And the Aultmore added a bit of power and richness, and the sherried blended malt butt added all the sort of fruit and nice, softer, earthier, rancio, plummy notes. And the combination, the fusion of the two together, brought down by a couple of degrees to 53% bottling strength, I think just works really well. And it's exactly the sort of product that I wish we could do more of. So I'm very curious to hear your feedback on it, and let me know what you think. I mean, it's technically 17 years old, but half of it is really 22 years old. So I think to me, this is what creatively I find really interesting in doing in whiskey. And I think it represents, in my view, like better value than a lot of single malts at the same sort of age. I think the money goes further in these sorts of blended malts, really. So yeah, I'm really curious to get your feedback on it, see what you think. Bloody delicious. Yeah, okay, that's good feedback. Thank you. I approve of that feedback. Do the potions ever go really wrong, and do you have to drink the results yourselves? So nothing's ever gone drastically wrong, in the sense that I do the little test mixes at home, and if something's not working, we'll never progress that beyond to an actual bottling. I have done, like early on, so for a good example is the very first Equinox and Solstice bottling was an Edgedour. It was a 2010 and a 2003 Edgedour, both first fill bourbon barrels mixed together. And I was still, figuring out and learning, and I didn't get the ratio at home right. I still like the resulting bottling. I think it's good whiskey, but it was quite different from what I anticipated from my home test vatting. And that experience made me sort of sharpen up and get a bit better at it and start getting very, very like specific and precise with my home mixes. And since then, the results have been, by and large, reasonably as anticipated. And in the best instances, things like the Jura 27-year-old we did, or the Glenkeith 28-year-old, these were, in my view, better than the vatting at home. Like they just clicked, and you got something really magical. And So that I love doing these kind of multi-vintage recipes where, take two casks that are side by side, sibling casks. You'll probably get quite a similar whiskey. You might get something that's a bit more rounded and full and well balanced, as I think you tend to do when you're mixing and putting two casks together. I think you get something that's usually better than one cask on its own. But when you start to introduce different cask types and also different ages, then I start to think you really get interesting products, because you're just bringing in little complex influences and you're creating something quite distinctive and separate and specific in the finished product. And also, it creates something that wouldn't otherwise exist, which for me is a really important part of what Decadent Drinks tries to do as a bottler. Like, if we have a I don't know, like values or USPs as a bottler, I suppose it's having fun with what we do, artwork, but also making an effort to put out products which would not otherwise exist without our decision making, our experimenting a bit, our judgment, whatever. It's not rocket salad, it's not brain science, but it's just making that little bit of extra effort, I suppose, is how I would frame it. So I really am happy with the NAS. It's in that pantheon of sponge bottlings where we've taken different vintages, different casks, different distilleries even, and created something which I think is a really nice original product. So I'm really happy with it. So yeah, if you haven't got the subtext yet, you should all buy it. That's the rule. Yeah, it's the archive sale after all.
The segue's lovely. It gives me a really nice opportunity to say, sorry, I'm going to keep adding in. We're giving you a 10% discount code for tonight, so if there's anything that you really like and you want to buy, I'll just add that in as we go along. I'll add it in each time I add a new bottling in. Okay.
Yeah, we've got free shipping on orders over 200 quid, and you can also get another 10% if you add in what's the code? Is it sponge
tasting 10?
Sponge. Okay, cool. Right, sponge tasting 10. There we go. Yeah, so do make the most of that. That's cool. I'm glad people seem to like. Is that general consensus? People seem to enjoy the NAS going down well.
It's so gorgeous.
Some love for NAS 30-year-old. I agree. Really, really good. Do you know anything about the origin of these casks? So yes, Aultmore is straightforward. It's a first fill sherry butt, and we bought that from Signatory stock. So it was a cask. I think it would have been a filling that Signatory purchased in 2006 that had been matured, by them ever since. And that was good, but that was on its own. It had the right kind of profile for this, but it was one of these casks where the natural cask strength was like 66%. And I selected that one because at the right type of sherry, but with all that alcohol and power and weight, it really helped to elevate the 2001 blended malt. The 2001 blended malt, but that's from quite a large parcel of stock, which a lot of other bottlers have bottled. We've not done one on its own yet, very specifically because I think they make much more sense as blending ingredients to make interesting other whiskies. Again, I'm just looking. We exist in a very competitive, crowded marketplace, and I view my job as finding ways to differentiate what we put out and do something a bit different. And with that stock, it was ex-Edrington, so it's really Macallan and Highland Park essentially that's in it. And it was every so often I think Edrington realizes what they used to do is blend their malts at birth and mature them in sherry, and that essentially was going to form the basis for some premium, older, famous grouse bottlings. That was the original concept behind doing that. And then they just realized we can just make way more money just by selling this as malt to the brokers and the indie bottlers. So I think that's probably what did it. Every so often they look at their balance sheet and think we should have a few extra million quid on there before the end of the quarter, and they fling a load of this stock into the market, which is great because it's really good juice, and I think it makes a fantastic base on which to build a interesting blended malt. So yeah, that's it. That's probably Highland Park, Macallan, maybe a bit of Tamdhu in there, or possibly Glenrothes, but I don't know the exact recipe. What I do know, actually, interestingly, about the blended malt 2001 butt is that there's a part of it is actually much older. It was stock that was married in 2001 and casked. So, as I'm told, some of it is like older 70s juice that's in it. I don't know what proportion. So actually maybe a part of this bottling is even older than 22. I don't know. But yeah, that's the rumor mill anyway. So yeah, it's really lovely stuff. Yeah, very happy with it. Just reading comments here. Yeah, it does have that, that sort of 70s fruity old school sherry vibe is definitely in there in a way that yeah, it definitely works. And this is one which is, in my mind, this is like tumbler juice. Just pour a large dram and just sip away, put your slippers on, not on a day like this obviously, but put your feet up, have your favorite vinyl on, watch Lawrence of Arabia and pass out. That's what this whiskey is for, essentially. What do you think about it, Julia?
Yeah, I think especially compared to the Belle Blair, it's like much more earthy. Lots of earthy tones, which I really like.
It's a good two-parter, the Belle Blair and this, because you're really getting like very clear, obvious, this is first fill bourbon, this is sherry. You could use these two in a like whiskey 101 basics tasting to indicate like basic maturation flavor profiles, which is quite cool. But yeah, they're both very good examples of their respective cask types, I think. What do you think, Julie? You still a fan of the old Angus?
Yeah, I was saying in the notes that the chat rather that I love the old Rancio notes, like the old like worn leather, like it's like almost like a worn leather satchel if you just stick your head in it, and that lovely kind of worn wood furniture and
it's you could almost drink this out of like a cognac snifter. Just have a really good measure from a cognac snifter, and I don't know, have a cigar. Pop your feet up. Yeah, that's what I think. Just actually going back to this image of lying down, having my feet. It's probably because I'm really tired and I've got to get up at 3 a.m. to get a flight. So it's probably why I'm thinking about it. But it's comfort whiskey, cozy comfort whiskey.